Hi, I thought I'd talk to you about removal of executors. It's something we get asked about quite a lot, so I just thought it'd be helpful to just talk through what it takes to remove an executor, a lot of the reasons that we are given and whether or not we think those are any good, and also just to talk about costs as well. Removal of executors. Why would you want to remove an executor? Well, often because you think it's just you're not getting what you want from the estate. It's taking too long. You think that decisions have been made that are wrong, or you're concerned about how they've been dealing with the administration of the estate. The first one is delay. That's the one that we see most often. Essentially, people just saying that it's taking too long for an estate to be administered. You may have seen what's referred to as an executor's year, the idea that an estate can be administered in a year. That's very much a sort of rough indication. Some estates will take much less time to administer, and some will take much longer. It really depends on what's in the estate. It doesn't always equate to value, so sometimes there are very small estates that take a long time to administer, and sometimes there are those very large estates that don't take very much time at all. It really depends as to what's in the estate and what's involved. The process can be complicated. There can be tax issues that need to be dealt with. There can be particular assets that may be complicated. So these things can take time. Generally speaking, I think the court are likely to be fairly sympathetic. I think things are going to have to be very, very delayed for no real good reason for you to be able to get rid of an executor just because of delay. I think you're going to have to show probably that the executor's actions or inactions have caused loss. The second thing we see in terms of executors removals is conflict. So essentially conflicts of interest. So where there are competing interests, and that may well be because the executor is also a beneficiary, but also because there are other interests. So for example, the estate might include some shares in which one of the executor is a director of that company, for example, and that may cause issues. The key issue that the court are going to look at on any application is whether or not the interests of the beneficiaries are being prejudiced. And that's really going to be the first and foremost in terms of the court and how they look at these things. So it's really questions: are the beneficiaries' interests being prejudiced? Are these conflicts of interest ones that can be managed, or are they causing fundamental problems in how the estate is administered? The second type of conflict we see is just conflicts between the executors and the beneficiaries. So essentially they just don't get on. It happens all the time, particularly in family situations where you've got, for example, one of the children administering an estate with the other children as beneficiaries. Again, the court's focus on those applications is very much the interest of the beneficiaries. So just because they don't get on doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to get an executor removed. It's going to take more than that. And again, it's about the interest of the beneficiaries. Is the estate being administered properly, and are the interests of the beneficiaries at risk in terms of the estate? There are all sorts of other grounds and reasons that might apply, but certainly those are the most common ones that we see. In terms of the process itself, the first thing you would always do in any potential claim would be to write to the executor in question and to set out what the basis of the claim is. What are the reasons upon which you are saying that they should be removed? They'll have an opportunity to respond to that letter, and then you see where you go. You may be able to settle it. Those cases are often settled by the appointment of someone independent, but that doesn't always work. It doesn't always suit all estates, and particularly those very small estates where the costs of a professional are going to be potentially a fairly significant proportion of the estate. If the claims can't be resolved, then you're into court proceedings. You would issue your claim, and then that would be listed for an initial hearing before a judge. Often those hearings can deal with the applications fairly quickly. So if they're straightforward, then they might be able to be dealt with within a matter of months. If they're more involved and more drawn out, then they may take months, if not years, to be resolved. So they're not always a quick process. And of course, they bring with them the risk of costs. This is normal litigation. There is no assumption in these cases that the estate pays the costs. And the starting point for the court will normally be that whoever wins gets their costs from the loser. The executor, of course, is ordinarily entitled to an indemnity, so they're entitled to their costs as of right from the estate, but the court can say no to that. They can say, well, look, you've acted unreasonably and therefore you should be deprived of your costs. So it's a risky game. It can be an expensive game on both sides. So it's important that you know what you're doing before you get into it. And that's whether you're bringing an application, whether you're defending an application. It's important that you take advice early, follow that advice. Litigation is there, and ultimately, it's there as a last resort, but it is a last resort. These claims are ones that can be sorted. And as I said, often the answer is to appoint someone independent. It doesn't always work, but it certainly works in a large number of cases, and certainly from my experience, it tends to work quite well. And indeed, we act as independent administrator on a lot of estates where there has been disputes about executors. I hope that was helpful, a bit of a trot through some of the stuff around removal of executors. Any other questions, then please do not hesitate to get in touch. Many thanks.